Hey, okay, well, review time again today, and I thought I would do something a little different and review a film outside of the horror movie genre. It's an Australian film called The Stranger, starring Sean Harris and Joel Edgerton, and it's directed by Thomas M. Wright, who's known for acting, directing, and writing, so he's a bit of an all-rounder. The film itself was made for Netflix and can still be found on there as far as I'm aware. Okay, so the first thing to note is that the film is based, albeit rather loosely, on a true story. In 2003, Daniel Morecambe, a 13-year-old boy living with his family in Australia, was abducted and killed by a man named Brett Peter Cowan, a known sexual predator who had done time in Australia for past offences against children. I do think, though, calling such people predators, it gives them way too much credit. I mean, a lion or a shark or a wolf or something is a predator, not some fucking freak who kidnaps children off the street, does God knows what to them, kills them, and then slinks off into the shadows, and hopefully Cowan will die in prison. The film is controversial inasmuch as the family who suffered this tragic loss didn't agree with the film being made and chose not to participate in it. And that did make me think twice about writing this review. However, I feel that the story presented is compelling, the performances are brilliant, and the subject matter is handled sensitively enough that I think it does little harm to Daniel's memory. We don't see the child taken, for example, which is very important both to the story and in terms of taste. The film itself centers around the relationship between Sean Harris's character, Henry, who's an analogue for Karen, I suppose, and Joel Edgerton's character, Mark, an undercover police officer. The story focuses on the extraordinary sting operation launched by the police in, I think, Western Australia to catch a sexual predator. Basically, an undercover gang is set up to entice Henry to join them and basically give himself away, thereby making an arrest possible, while an investigation continues into the background of the case, gathering evidence and so forth. The gang, quote unquote, are essentially drug dealers, and they can also help make fugitives or criminals disappear, providing them with passports, means to leave the country, money, etc. And Henry, who is down on his luck and tired of manual work, joins them eagerly enough due to the promise of a big payout from an upcoming crime. Long story short, he does end up confessing to the murder and disposal of the body of the child and is arrested for these crimes at the end of the film. So, what we have here then is partly a police procedural, partly a character-driven crime drama, and it works very well on both counts. There are no big moments in the movie, really. After all, good acting, as they say, is not always the most obvious acting, and this film shows the truth of that. The subtle menace, desperation, and strangeness of Harris's character plays beautifully against Edgerton's emotionally crumbling police officer, as the two become ever closer until the eventual arrest, which, when it happens, feels utterly inevitable. There is little joy for the officers who capture Henry, only vindication that they have the perpetrator and emotional exhaustion, which for me adds to the realism of the piece. The feel of the movie reminds me a lot of a Michael Mann film, honestly. The 2-hour length of the film, with its sometimes lingering cinematography suggesting the long struggle to find justice in a case such as this, along with the attention to detail and the willingness to show what this kind of job can do to the people who we rely on to do it, rather than making them traditional heroes, makes for a more touching and emotional experience, I think. Having said that, though, the film is written in such a way that we as an audience don't get particularly overwhelmed or depressed. At least I didn't. While it is sensitive and emotional in parts, it doesn't overplay the tragedy of the events described. Now, I don't know for certain because I don't know a huge amount about the original case, the real life case, but I would imagine that much of the Morecambe family's objections to this film surround the end and the characterization of Henry. We don't see him convicted for the crime. Indeed, there's a debate throughout the film over whether he can even be prosecuted. And the character of Henry seems almost likeable at times, which is apparently quite different from the character of Brett Peter Cohen, the man convicted of their son's murder. These elements then do misrepresent the real circumstances of the case, but while I can understand how that would be painful for the family that went through the real ordeal, it took 8 long years for them to see the man responsible for their son's death jailed. This is not designed to be a telling of their story primarily, at least for me. It is loosely based on it, and perhaps one of the criticisms of the movie could be that it followed the case very closely in some respects, but not in others. I do think, though, that the film captures a different truth, that even if you manage to capture a perpetrator like this and put them away for the rest of their lives, there is, I would imagine at least, little closure to be found. A child still lies dead, a life has still been cut short in the cruelest of ways, and though a measure of justice follows the arrest of the man responsible, it cannot replace the memory of those lost. So, in conclusion then, if you like this kind of character study and stories about how an extraordinary team of people came together to catch what surely has to be the worst kind of criminal, an operation similar to what is depicted in the film actually happened in the real life case, which adds weight to the story, in my view, then you will enjoy and or appreciate this movie. But if you go into the film expecting cinematic shows of heroism, a traditional good versus evil romp, you may find it hard to stick with. These people aren't portrayed as black and white, but as three-dimensional human beings. Sparks don't literally fly, at least not physically. The central relationship in the film being defined by a complexity that changes those who participate in it. Having said that, though, and with all the above being said, I hope you enjoyed this review of The Stranger. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.